without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter.
Sounds like a great idea.
So, Jessica Meyrowitz has the company called itsayummy.com. What she does is fabulous, and I don't want to say too much about it, so I'm just going to let her jump right in. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here today.
Yeah, so tell everybody it's a yummy. What's yummy?
The yarn is so soft and yummy. So I manufacture a custom-made, oversized, 100% merino wool yarn. And the company got started. I had owned an advertising agency for 15 years. I closed that agency in December of 2015. 2 weeks after I closed the agency, I decided I was going to take a couple of creative classes. I was going to try something new, expand my community, meet some new people. So I signed up for a pottery class and I signed up for a knitting class. I signed up for both of them on January 4th of 2016. 1 week into the pottery class, our pottery teacher said, go online and look for things to make in pottery class. And after about 10 minutes, I had more than 2 years worth of pottery I was going to be making. I didn't have the kitchen cabinets for all the pottery I was going to make. So I said, you know what? I'll look for something to knit. And I came across something that's called extreme knitting. And extreme knitting is knitting with very large needles and very large yarn. And I said, oh, I love the look of that. It's so interesting. So I said, I'm going to make a throw for my family room. But I couldn't find the quality of yarn that I wanted to knit with, that I wanted to put into my home. And since I had a little bit of time on my hands, since I didn't have the agency anymore, I started calling around to artisan-based mills, so smaller mills that I knew I could speak to the artisan personally and explain what it was that I was looking for. By mid-January, when those samples started coming into me, I'm like, this yarn is so fabulous. I can't be the only one who's going to want to knit with this. And I knew how to brand a company because I had been doing it for 15 years. So I said, I'm going to start a yarn company. And February 4th, 1 month after I had started the knitting class, I LLC'd myself again. And I called the company It's a Yummy because the yarn is so soft and yummy. And when I would call up the mills, I would say, don't send me a sample unless you touch that yarn and say, oh, that is yummy. That's where the name came from. And then I spent the next couple of months going to sheep farms all over the Hudson Valley and really learning everything that I could about sheep and yarn and wool and immersing myself in that community and that culture. By the summertime, I had my mill picked out. I had a good base of product knowledge, and I started writing samples, started writing my patterns for my products. I launched October 23rd of 2016 on Facebook. And I had never even been on Facebook before, but I had launched on Facebook because I really needed to touch every order because it was just me. I would be knitting all of the products. So I launched with 3 products and 13 colors. But there was such demand immediately. I felt very lucky that I said, how am I going to knit all of this? I knew that I needed more knitters. And knitting is an art form. And I couldn't go to somebody who had been an existing knitter because I was producing a finished product. So I needed consistency. And like any art form, everybody's hand is a little bit different. So I needed to teach people to knit so that way they could help me produce the products. I needed to teach them to knit just like I did. So I taught moms in my town all over Chappaqua, New York, how to knit so they could help me knit the products. And by February of 2017, a year after I had LLC'd myself, I had my knitting force in place and I was ready to introduce more colors and more patterns. And we did that. And by November of 2017, I launched my .com, my internet operation. We were ready to go that direction. So my website launched and we had at that point probably over 20 products and over 40 colors. And I had, I was selling the yarn, I was selling the finished products, I was selling the knitting tools, and I had a blurb on the website that said knitting kits coming soon. And I was lucky enough that the Monday before Thanksgiving, I was able to have a conversation and get my product onto the Today Show. So we launched our knitting kits officially on the Today Show as a must-have holiday gift that year. And that really changed the trajectory of our company. And as a result of that, people started interviewing me because here I had reinvented myself in a creative field. And people would say, how are you knitting all of these products? And I would say, well, I'm not. I've taught all of these moms in my town to knit. And that sort of became a story unto itself, a cottage industry that was being created in Chappaqua. So people would then say to me, can you teach me to knit? I would love to learn to knit. And I'm like, well, I'm not really a knitting teacher. I guess I could try it though. I did teach all of these moms to knit, and I guess I could. So I launched a class in the New York area, and I was calling it A Skill in a Scarf in an Hour. I would teach you to knit with my yarn and my needles, and in an hour you would learn and you would have made a scarf. And I just really loved the teaching aspect of it. So I started doing it more and more. And I was lucky enough that I started being approached by the top spas, destination spas and resorts all around the country. And they asked me if I would come out and teach their guests to knit. So they would bring me out there, and I started teaching more and more. And then corporations started calling me and saying, hey, will you come in and teach our team to knit? It's so mindful, it's so meditative, and it's a great team building experience. So I was, at this point, my yarn company was really taking off. We had over 50 colors, over 50 products. I mean, it was really blossoming. And I loved the teaching. And I was traveling all over the country, teaching businesses, business executives, people coming to spas, hotels, all over the place, teaching everybody to knit. And everything was going along swimmingly well. And then COVID hit.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So I had all of these workshops that I was going to be teaching. And I said, well, what can I do? And I honestly, I never even heard of Zoom before COVID. I didn't even know Zoom existed. But I started hearing about it in the first few weeks of COVID. And I said, I bet I can transfer my in-person classes to Zoom and start teaching virtually. And I was lucky enough that the classes really took off. We ended up getting written about in Parade magazine and the Washington Post, and we started getting a lot of press for these virtual classes, and it was fabulous. I really loved it. The classes really started to bloom, and as an entrepreneur, what it's given me is a way to touch even more consumers around the country than I was even before, and it's given me another route of scalability. I can now scale through Zoom, and I will keep Zoom as part, even after COVID is done, as part of my tools that I have and ways of reaching my customers. It's been, I've been lucky enough to be able to pivot this portion of my business that way.
That's great, Jessica. Thanks so much for sharing the nitty-gritty of your business. And we enjoy hearing about it. It's really interesting to hear about how you've scaled your business, because this is really, there's no machines, right? It's one person at a time to build the products. And so that's very impressive. How do you keep everybody organized with, and how many people do you have knitting for you now?
So what I do is I rotate through my knitters. So it really is something that I wanted to make sure that they can do when it worked for them. I have one mom who knits at the hockey rink in the mornings when she's there with her kids and they're practicing. I have somebody else who knits in the carpool line. I have some people that knit all day long. I really wanted it to work within their schedule. I wanted them to find a love of knitting, and then also something that they can do to help their families or help themselves and find an enjoyment that way. So I go through my Rolodex of knitters and I try to spread it around. I have certain people that like to do certain items more than others. And I will say to somebody, can you do this? I need this in a day. I need this in a week, whatever it is. And if they say no, it's totally fine. I go on to the next person. and we have a really good system in place. And until at this point, I still have my same knitters that I started with. And until they tell me that they can't knit anymore or their plate's full, I, at this point, am not bringing on any new knitters because I want to keep my core staff happy and knitting as much as they want to be knitting.
That's great. So I want to move back to something you said.
Sure.
You keep saying that you were lucky. I don't think it's so much luck, honestly, but how did you actually get on the Today Show? Like, what were the steps that you took to get yourself on the Today Show?
It was through help. People stepped in and helped and showed them my website and my products. And I will not use the word lucky. I'll take lucky out of that. But I was fortunate enough that because of my background, because of having my advertising agency for so many years and having so many connections that way, that, you know, I believe a core of many businesses or all businesses is relationships. Your relationships with your employees, your relationships with your coworkers, your relationships with your customers, and your relationships with your peers. And if you foster all of that, you never know when somebody remembers that and comes back and helps you one day.
So
Excellent.
Justin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm amazed at your business, Jessica. That's pretty amazing.
thank
Just the way that you've prevailed through some adversity, even with what we dealt with this last year. As I'm looking, you know, remember from what we were talking about, I'm always looking to the future. And I heard you say I a lot, especially on the coaching and things of that nature. Do you have any plans in your future to take your Zoom meetings, maybe move them to an online digital course, maybe a webinar process, so that now you can remove yourself, maybe not 100%. You may end up having like a monthly Coach with Jessica type thing that they pay you for your time. Any thoughts around that?
Yes, it's so interesting. When you were talking earlier, it really resonated with me when you said that the owner has to sort of remove themselves, because that's a really important part. And that has always been on my radar, especially because of when I had my advertising business, because when it came time to leave that, I realized I was the business. Even though there was profitability and there was accounts in place and all of that, it came down to going back to what I said before, my relationships. And that was really something I've always been aware of. But it's tough because when you're starting a company, you are the product. And the product is something and you're something, and you both need each other to propel, to build the business. But I did learn from my first go around as an entrepreneur that you do need that safety net in place. You do need to think, well, how can I sort of step aside, or what do I have in place? So before COVID was hitting, I was actually training people to be able to teach, because the product, which stands on its own. I had that aspect of it, and I went into the business with that thought process. But when the classes really started to take off and it put me again front and center, I did know that I needed that in place. So I was training people, and it's a certain personality to be able to lead a class and to have it, because it's an entertainment aspect. It's not just coming in to learn a skill. You're entertaining somebody for an hour, so they have to feel like they're getting something out of it. You have to be dynamic. It's a certain personality. So I was working with people to get moving more in that direction. And eventually it will be something more where maybe there will be some master classes and some other classes and going more in that direction. So yes, when you were talking about it earlier, I'm like, oh boy, do I know that.
Yes.
Excellent.
Here's
So
some food for thought, just something you might want to consider. My wife, she loves watching cooking shows, right? She watches these beautiful women and family farms out in the country of nowhere. And she like literally watches them step by step on how they make these amazing masterpieces. Now, they never look exactly the same, but nonetheless, she's able to learn from them. Now her dinners are really, really good. In fact, my belly's showing in a little bit, right? Whenever you hire people, though, it gets expensive. and it causes one of your number one drivers of your loss in your company because of the training of other people. If you could use technology, just as a challenge, if you could use technology, create it into a course that has your personality, which the business needs, and then you pull it together, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once every other week, where you get everybody together and you show them that one little loop, that special loop that you have. Now you're avoiding the number one cost in a business by training other coaches. So just challenge a little bit on that, chew on it. I'm not saying you have to do it, obviously, but it's something that we would also try to, how do we grow without bringing more people in?
Yeah, I was actually just going to piggyback off of Justin, because I was sitting here and thinking about, knitting, and like, it's really like therapeutic. I remember being a kid and, making those little pot holders, and how therapeutic it was. Right. So I think there's definitely a connection between knitting and mastering mindfulness. And I just was curious. I saw on your website that you have those do-it-yourself kits. And is there I guess a content version of that, audibly or video, that comes with that? Because I was just thinking about what Justin was saying and how you might be able to scale with a combo of the do-it-yourself kit and the content connection.
Yes, it's interesting that you say that, because we do. So with the starter kit, that's how the skill in a scarf came in, because the do-it-yourself mini scarf kit is the one, and we have lessons for that. We also have videos for everything, so people can do it at home. They can follow the video, they can go faster, slower, and repeat it as often as they'd like. So we do have those elements. And because of COVID and the extra time that we've had and the more technology that we've been able to use, we are now perfecting all of that. And so we've had bits of it before, and now we have a fuller library. So yes, totally agree with you. And the workshops that I do teach are called Yummy Mindful Knitting Workshops. So definitely right there with you with the mindfulness.
And you forgot to bring up again one of the biggest advantages, which is if you're knitting, you're not eating, right? So next time you're on, we'd like you to bring some statistics about how your customers have lost weight, because I think that's a great advantage of your system.